Welcome to this week's episode of The World According to Craig. As usual, I have someone smarter, better, and prettier than me joining me, and this week it's about journalism and media and truth to power with journalist Husam Asi. Thank you so much for joining today.
I wouldn't say that I'm prettier than you, but that's a compliment.
I'm so excited today that we're going to talk about so much of the work that you do and the perspective that you bring. But before we dive into that, I'd really love for people to get to know more about you, and in particular, how one ends up being a journalist. I mean, to be frank, today, there are a whole lots of people who are woke, who want to go into journalism, and it's the thriving golden age of the Washington Post and the New York Times and the BBC. But it wasn't always that way. And it still has its challenges. So when did you decide that you wanted to risk having your name dragged through the very press that you're a part of as a journalist?
For me, it was a coincidence. I didn't train to be a journalist. I think I mentioned to you before, I studied physics and then medicine. And I was doing research at the UCL, University College London in London. And there I was introduced to filmmaking, actually by Christopher Nolan. We were in the same college, and we had a film society, and I went there to
It's a good person to get an introduction from.
Well, he was just a student at the time. He was like studying English literature, and I never expected him to reach the pinnacle he did reach, but he was truly incredibly smart.
I guess he also understands physics from some of the movies that I watched, so you have that in common as well.
Actually, he did the English literature.
Okay.
There, the rest of us were from science background, except him. He was from art, and then I started making some movies with them, with the group. He was shooting Following at the time, and I got attracted to this field of art, which is very different than science. I was doing science. Mm-hmm. And it's a pure coincidence because I got a job at the San Francisco Med School to continue doing my professorship in neuroscience. And then I met a pretty girl, which she was also doing a PhD in neuroscience. And I decided to wait for her to complete her PhD before leaving to the US. In the meantime, I make some movies at the Film Society. And then I met another guy at the time. He was a news editor at the BBC, and he said, I can provide you some content. I said, like what? He said, let's do some film reviews. And I said, why not? So in a way, he opened the gate for me to journalism.
Got it. So your girlfriend...
you probably met him, Jason Korsner.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That was him. We met 2003.
Amazing. So your girlfriend opened the opportunity, and then Jason opened the door.
My girlfriend, she carried on. I mean, she became my wife later, but she moved into a different world. She became a lawyer, and she became like a super lawyer. And I moved into this world.
And you became a super film journalist extraordinaire.
I won't call it super, but the other thing that truly attracted me, I wanted to make movies, and. What drove me to make movies was the same motivation that got me into journalism. Because I was born in Israel. I'm a Palestinian. And when I moved to Europe, I moved to England initially, I was amazed by the prejudices people have about a guy like me. People would call me a terrorist and did horrible stuff. I said, where did you get these ideas? Oh, don't you go to madrasas? Don't you do this? Didn't you blow up yourself?
It's from every movie they were watching.
Yeah, and then, I recall asking one of my best friends, he was with us, with Chris, he was one of the Film Society. I said, when you think of an Arab, what really comes up in your mind? And he said, these nasty terrorists who killed the professor in Back to the Future. I said, my God, that's the way you think of me? He said, no, you are so different than them. You're very different. I said, well, then whoever doesn't know me, then they think exactly like you. He said, oh, probably yes.
It's a sorry yet accurate state of the world where our impressions of people are formed by what we see in movies. I mean,
Yep.
I would argue that most of what people know about the Russians is probably from Die Hard.
The same with me. That's how I imagined Russians. Until I went to Russia, visited Russia, I said, my God, this is very different. Thank God I was reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy.
I mean, I that is so incredibly disappointing and yet not surprising.
Yeah, but that those conversations propelled me to do something about it. And I didn't know what to do. And I said, oh my God, I have to present to them a different perspective, something that they don't know. But then even when you try to tell them or convey to them a different perspective, they reject it and they make you sound like crazy because suddenly the truth becomes so extreme and the untruth is the mainstream. How do you change that? But these experiences, we are made of these experiences.
Yeah.
That's what drives us in life. I decided I have to do something about it. Initially, I thought about movies and I started writing scripts and I made a few short films and I came to Hollywood not to do journalism. Journalism was on the side. And as you mentioned earlier, in the 2000s, journalism was in decline.
Right.
Everybody has become a blogger. And I was another blogger. And I was talking about movies. I was not really propagating any crazy ideas. And being a journalist was not something you aspire to anymore because of what happened. The internet kind of took all the glamour out of it.
Yeah, suddenly everyone felt like everyone had a voice, but
Yes.
not all voices are supposed to be equal quality. Yeah.
And your talent as a journalist has become irrelevant because all people want is a performance. They come to the internet to watch somebody performing in news.
Right.
Give them what they want to hear, not what is true or factual.
Death by TikTok.
So in a way, journalism is I don't know how to describe it, but we are not the messengers of the news anymore as we used to be.
Right.
People in America, for instance, not only in America, all over the world, but in America specifically, I recall when I was here in the 90s, whatever I asked people about something, I tried to tell them about something. Oh yeah, but the TV said something different. The TV was sacred.
And
whatever it said on TV was sacred. Not anymore.
And now Facebook and TikTok tell you something and people believe that. I think that's what's interesting to me about your journey is you among other things, you started with this idea of how do I disabuse people of the notions they have about me and other people through stories. And now you spend a lot of time doing that directly by bringing stories into their home that counter what they know or hold to be true. And you do that through your work with the BBC, through a number of Middle Eastern outlets.
Again, you see, this is important. You mentioned that. Why do I do it on BBC and not on other very rich, high-paying Arab networks? BBC is the least. It doesn't pay well, like the others. It's a fact.
Run by the government and not
Exactly.
very.
Yes, and it's like public entity. Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya and all these ones,
Yeah.
they have tons of money and they can pay you the cinema show on Al Jazeera is like $100,000 a piece.
Okay.
I'm not going to mention mine. It's way less than that.
I'm suddenly reconsidering my professional choices. Yes.
However, if I want to work on Al Jazeera, I have to follow some script.
Right.
I cannot be free. I cannot talk about whatever I want to talk. I can't talk about, I can't bring Israeli talent. I can't bring Gal Gadot on these networks. I can't bring gay people. I can't even talk about homosexuality and as if they don't exist. I can't talk about women freedom. It depends on what kind of freedom, because I go beyond what they accept as freedom. For them, it becomes immorality. What I call for women freedom, for them, they can interpret it as immorality. So this is something I can say or I can do on BBC. BBC never limited me with any topic. I can say I can do whatever I want and talk about anything, and that's what matters to me. I want to empower those who are misunderstood, women, gays. This is the problem that I face. People saw me as if I was a Bin Laden guy. And the same with the Arab world. They look at Israeli, they say, oh, they're all settlers who want to kill us. The same with the Americans. They look at the Arabs or Muslims, they all hate us. Why do they hate us? You go to the Arabs, they look at Americans, oh, why America hates us? As if America is one person. And this is the crazy thing.
Depends if you're choosing a Biden voter or a Trump voter, I guess, to start with.
Exactly. When you come to America, we see a million different perspectives on the world. But the guy from the outside, these are the prejudices, and these are the lack of communication and understanding. And that's what I'm trying to bridge by presenting the different perspectives to the people and hope they accept it. But then you are facing all these, not even bloggers now, they are called influencers in social media.
Yes.
And the more extreme they are, the more followers they get. And the more popular they are. So I'm fighting
and
these
headlines.
Exactly. How can you fight those? If the truth is not sexy, no one is interested. You don't get followers by telling the truth.
I mean, this is, I could see that. You could work an ice bucket challenge into your interview, but I don't think that might discredit the interview. Exactly. I mean, so you've chosen freedom over the Al Jazeera paycheck, which I appreciate in terms of ethical considerations. Like, that's a great idea. And now you want to bring sort of truth or a different perspective, even to those who may not be ready to hear it. That sounds like it's setting you up to get your tires slashed, right? How do you even begin to chart a message? Is it enough that one person hears it? Do you just stay true to the message, or do you find yourself trying to like seed it in a little bit and say, okay, this is where you started, but this is where you should be looking? How do you meet someone who's so diametrically opposite to what you're bringing across in your piece? How do you begin to choose what pieces even to bring forward?
I forgot the name of the French philosopher who said, I like ideas that I disagree with than ideas that I agree with, because the ones I disagree with, they challenge me. And that's what we want. That's what I want. I go for the ones that challenge me and challenge my audience, not the ones that are agreeable to me and to my audience.
So you're not broadcasting to a MAGA rally.
No. Okay. And what I'm doing is suicidal, because taking this path, I know that I will never be popular, and I'll be upsetting a lot of people. And if you look at the stuff I do, some of them are upsetting the left side. I had Donald Trump Jr. retweeting one of my interviews. My interviews with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. Imagine that. And then I get from the other side, people from his camp condemning me for talking about racism with Denzel Washington and calling me all kind of nasty names.
So you are damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Exactly. So the truth is not nice to anybody, because none of us has the authority on truth. And everybody has their own truth. And I grew up in science. In science, we had to reach something called truth. You can't just have a perspective. You have to prove it mathematically.
Right.
Empirically.
Politicians and don't seem to
exactly.
Of this.
And interesting, if you read, I just read Barack Obama's latest book, and he said people are not interested in facts. They just want to be moved emotionally. And that's the difference between politics and science. So I come from the world of science. I'm bringing my scientific thinking into a world which is very, very subjective. It has very little care or difference to truth. Everybody here in this world is trying to propagate and promote their agenda, propagate their views and promote their own agendas. And you see this with journalists. I mean, come on, you can't tell me that Fox News and CNN are reporting the same news.
Tucker Carlson is on his own planet.
I mean, just watch these two channels. I deliberately sometimes I sit down when we get into hotels. You get bored or you want to fill the void sometimes, and I switch between CNN and Fox News. They sound like two different planets.
Yes.
So, and this is the same country. They're reporting the same news. So journalism ceased to become the authority of the truth. It was never the authority of truth. It's now being challenged, and they are losing control, and they are pushing even to more extremes in order to attract audience. And what we're having now is a divide, a deep divide within societies, not only American society. You see this in every society. I mean, in the Arab world, you have Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera. It's exactly like Fox News and CNN. Completely different news.
I don't know if it's comforting.
About the same news.
It's not comforting that they have the same divide. It should be.
And you can see people, for instance, if you tell somebody you want to tell a truth, like the BBC in the middle, and then you compete, the fans of Al Jazeera, you can see them, this is lies, all lies. You are Saudi agents, those are Al Jazeera people. And they curse you and say Al Jazeera said something different. Al Arabiya people, they come and curse me. You are just Al Jazeera agents. You are all liars. Because it doesn't match.
So the truth is a lie to everyone that they're not willing to believe.
Exactly. There is no truth anymore. And you as a journalist, you have most journalists, sadly, they choose one side because they want to retain their jobs.
Right.
And they want to survive. Journalists are in a very, very difficult position now, financially speaking. And if they don't work for something like the BBC, they have to work for one of those, and all these magazines, one, without mentioning the name, a newspaper I worked for, they were on the brink of bankruptcy. So they got one rich guy from one of those Gulf states in the Arab world. He pulled them out of bankruptcy, but now they have to adhere to his script. So it's...
But you haven't capitulated. You haven't given in.
No, I have not.
You're fighting the good fight on the truth, which makes me think that even though it's not Tucker Carlson and it's not Anderson Cooper, that there are people out there who are interested in telling the truth. That I'm always the inherent optimist, maybe more than I should be about life. But you bring a lot of these incredible stories to folks that need to hear it and do change minds. What is that like? Do you hear from the people whose minds are changed in the midst of all the people yelling at you? Like did with the Gal Gadot piece, bringing her, to the Arab world in that context and that entertainment-based context. Do we use emotion to get people to believe facts now? Like if they're only willing to believe emotions, can we find the real facts and quietly seed them in?
Well, you see, it's not just merely delivering the words. It's how you deliver them, how you edit the interview. That makes a huge difference. And I don't get people say, I get more comments from people saying, wow, I didn't know that. They learn new things. Because it's kind of bring them information that somebody who has an agenda doesn't want to show. So for instance, I recall when I started interviewing, let's talk about the Israeli interviewees on my show, and it's in an Arabic network, on BBC Arabic. I recall colleagues from the Arab world warning me, don't do that. This is very dangerous. You will lose credibility. You will be attacked. You will this and this. And I said, then I'm not a journalist. If I just follow this trend, my job is to challenge, not to reinforce falsities and false prejudices. And I did. I recall if you saw my interview with Natalie Portman, and of course, Natalie was not very happy because she ends up being attacked in Israel. But a lot of the Arab audience loved her after that. They changed dramatically their perspective on her. For them, they thought, we've talked about, she hates them because she's a Zionist and they hate everybody who belongs to them. And suddenly they start praising her. And the haters, the extremists, still doubted her, in spite of what she said against racism and discrimination. The same I saw with Gal Gadot. Some people, because I wanted her, sometimes I feel I'm using these people, these talents, not using them, I egg them to speak or to show their humanity. Because somebody like Gal, not only Gal and others, people know them through the gossip magazines, which mostly false, instead of knowing who they are.
Yeah.
So I bring them and then let them talk. And they start talk nice stuff. And they talk about peace and love and humanity. And that
I like that siren song.
and that shocks people. Wow. I thought this person is a terrible person. If you look, and sadly with the celebrity interviews, if you look at them, they are so superficial and frivolous. And it's painful to watch because what a waste. That's it. How are you doing? Oh, how are your kids? And how this? You learn nothing about the substance of this human being, and people worship these guys.
So are the celebrities our key then? Is that the key to unlock the box of truth? Giving cultural figures an opportunity to engage people through emotion and hopefully facts? I mean...
There is more than that. I recall Anthony Hopkins. I did this interview with him, I think last year. He talked about spirituality, about philosophy, and he's an erudite man.
Yes. And a great artist.
And he's a great performer.
Yeah.
When he talks, even if he reads like the phone book, you would listen because he's so good.
We all aspire to be Anthony Hopkins.
I mean, when I did the interview, everything he said, I already know. I mean, this is not something outstanding or just out of this world. But the way he delivered it, the Arab world went crazy. Hundreds of thousands of people were just watching it and talking about it. It became the center of their attention. And as if he was a prophet. They really were. They were talking about him as he was a prophet who descended from heaven to talk. And he even challenged their beliefs.
Okay.
He said that you have to doubt. And he talked about being agnostic, which is a massive taboo in the Arab world. If I said it myself,
right,
they would have condemned me, and they wouldn't even listen to me, let alone, maybe they won't reach the level of condemning. And the people who tried to attack him because he was doubting everything they believed in, they were silenced instantly. This is the parasite. My God, I bring this big star. People listen to the star. And the way he does it, because he knows how, he didn't talk. He performed his answers. Right. And that's how we grab their attention. I urge you to, if you read the comments, people are exclaiming how he changed them, completely changed them. Suddenly they're having epiphany. Spiritual epiphany, thanks to his conversation, this few words in 10 minutes. The same with the English audience. It was aired also on English channels. The same reactions from all over the world. I said, this is amazing. From all cultures are responding to his spiritual chat, spiritual speech. I'm sure he's shocked himself.
So, that's incredible. And listen, there are these lions of the establishment like Anthony Hopkins that we all admire. So, how much trouble does that get us into then when everyone thinks not only that, these influencers can be quote unquote journalists, right? And they can break their TikTok news or use their 140 characters on Twitter. But what trouble does that get us into when these influencers also think that they too are celebrities and that they're not the erudite Anthony Hopkins? They are in their, if we're lucky, in their young 20s and have some modicum of education, but in many cases are just themselves and spouting off things that are just as wrong as anything else out there, right? Like they believe that it is enough that they believe it, therefore it must be true. That seems like it would put it, if people relate to them like they relate to Anthony Hopkins, I feel like we might be screwed. Like we have to discern the credible versus the incredible. How do you even begin to cut that balance?
This is exactly what I'm trying. This is exactly what I'm trying to find an alternative to, or I wouldn't dare say a solution. I mean, nobody has solutions to anything, but that's what I'm trying to achieve. Bringing someone famous like Anthony Hopkins, who is way smarter than all these false influencers who became influencers because they opened a gift on YouTube or they took off their clothes or whatever. I mean, this is very sad that our kids now, the young generation, are growing, absorbing knowledge and wisdom, if there is any, or informing perspective on the world from these. Sorry, I have to say, sometimes imbeciles. I mean, the stuff I see. I mean, I'll go to check on super influencers, and I just check what's going on. It's depressing. Still, if they open their mouth, suddenly it's more important than even the president. And
I mean, the president's greatest power is pretending to be an influencer. So.
Exactly. I mean, he became the same thing from a celebrity show, and he became a president. So the world now, we are substituting intelligence with celeb and with celebrity, and that's this is worrying for us as humanity and for all cultures. And this is something I found the solution not by if I bring a professor, nobody gonna listen, because now people listen only to famous people. They don't listen to smart people. So you combine the two, fame with intelligence, like Anthony Hopkins, for instance, Martin Scorsese, and people like these, and then bring them to the world, because then people listen. They listen to them. And that, in my interviews, I tried somehow to guide them to these topics. And sometimes the insecure ones, they freak out, and they feel that I'm trying to make them say things they don't want to say, because you are in this business, the PR business. You tell them exactly what they say.
Talk about the movie. Don't talk about anything else.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, Sam's in the corner being like, totally get the movie. Let's talk about world peace.
Exactly. And that interview you saw with Denzel Washington, Denzel didn't want to talk about it. He refused to talk about race completely. And then we had to talk without mentioning the name of your boss. And he had to talk to him to convince him, you should talk because that's the topic of your movie. Literally, we had to go through a lot of campaigning. I had to go through all that for him to talk about the topic we discussed. And I was viciously attacked for even asking him. But what I liked, it ignited a debate. Let them curse me as much as they like. I don't care. And I leave all their curses. I want people to see them maligning me for asking those questions, because I want the world to see how divided we are and how impervious to the other side, the other perspective.
Well, it's so funny because maybe I live in this bubble, but I hear so many people talking about how we need to listen to and engage with the other side. And I keep thinking, well, if everyone I know keeps saying that, why aren't we doing it? But I guess it's also about just the access to the mainstream and the masses. It's people like you who have the burden and responsibility of choosing who to bring on the show, enticing them to say something of value, and hoping that emotion leads to fact. That makes you a very large gatekeeper for a very large organization. But it's also, it's fascinating that it's not ever where you started to be, and yet it is, right? Dispelling the notion of what the people develop from what they see, and now you're doing it in completely different ways. And in fact, trying to use the things that they see to prompt those conversations. I don't know that anyone watched Back to the Future and was prompting a conversation about whether Arabs were terrorists really, or whether they were maligned and prejudiced, or however it means. But hopefully now maybe a movie or two can inspire that kind of a conversation.
Yes, and I mean, by the way, I don't blame. When I came here to Hollywood, and one of the people the first people I confronted on this topic, guess who? Jeffrey Katzenberg, the man who created all these movies. He was behind Back to the Future. He was behind Aladdin, which sparked huge controversy at the time because they made the Arabs look so bad. And I admire Jeffrey Katzenberg immensely. And he liked the question when I asked him why.
He's a thoughtful guy.
Yeah, and he was calm about it. And he said, I didn't know. I didn't know we were offending anybody, because that's how we saw the world.
Right.
That was the world we knew. We didn't know otherwise. We didn't know otherwise. But then when I heard and when people approached me about Aladdin and it provoked that controversy, I started thinking, maybe I was wrong. Let's try and fix this thing. And then when he did Princess of Egypt, he said, before we even started working on the script, I hired a rabbi, a Muslim scholar, and a Christian scholar, and I wanted their opinion. I wouldn't greenlight it until the three of them are happy, because the story touched the three religions.
Right.
So he learned from that controversy, because as long as you don't say anything, as long as you do not challenge the system or challenge the mainstream will never change. Will continue to move forward. So you can't blame Hollywood. You can't blame the system. You have yourself. If you find something wrong with the system, go in and try to fix it. I didn't see, Jeffrey was not angry with me and wanted to kick me out of the office because I asked this question. To the contrary, he wanted to hear what I thought. He wanted to know these things, and he welcomed that somebody's giving him a feedback. But you have to do it in a nice way. You can't go and say...
No shouting.
Yeah, you take a gun or you beat him with something and you throw an egg on him or something. You have to have a conversation. And respectful conversation. And I witnessed it so many times when I had these conversations with people who completely disagreed with me, and they had horrible prejudices against me. Like my friend said, I'm so different. And they changed their mind. They were surprised. So it's very simple. You just need to have a conversation.
Well, I think that's probably the best takeaway to end on, which is I love having a conversation with you about this today. And I love the conversations that you're bringing to light to the public. And I want to say to everyone, thanks for tuning in to this week's The World According to Craig, which is really the world according to smarter, better people. And if there's one takeaway, it's have a conversation. And if you're curious how to start, check out Sam on the BBC, and you'll see how an expert does it masterfully. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next week. And thank you so much for joining us today to talk about truth and conversation and culture and engagement in such a different way.
Thank you, Craig.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks for tuning in to The World According to Craig. The inside secret is not actually according to me. It's according to some of the most interesting people I know and their opinions on the things that affect us most. Together, we're just trying to make sense of the world, and I hope you'll join us every week.